Yo, what's going on, Epic 7 fam? Pat here with another how to play video, and in this one we'll be talking about Miss Charlotte's Dragon Waifu, Holiday Yufine. As with all of my how to play guides, we're going to go super in depth and talk about literally everything you could want to know about the character, including their stats, skills, possible endgame equipment builds, and teammate suggestions and counter picks for the character in World Arena. So without any further ado, let's get right into Holiday Yufine stats. Holiday Yufine is a fire warrior of the Libra zodiac symbol, which means she shares a stat line with Green Lilibet, Little Queen Charlotte, and her sister Luna. Looking at the actual stats, she has 1,119 attack, 6,266 health, 109 speed, 627 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150 critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, and no effectiveness or effect resistance. This is an incredibly well-balanced stat line, and while it's difficult to get Holiday Yufine to have really high stats in any one category, it is very easy for her to have respectable stats in all categories as a result. Before we move on to the skills, for the fun fact, Yufine in the English dub of Epic 7 is voiced by Kat Cressida, who is the voice of Clary, Vivian, and both versions of Charlotte. As another fun fact, if you were a kid who grew up watching American cartoons in the 90s, you may remember her voice as the girl who was constantly told to, and I quote, "Get out of my laboratory," as Dee Dee from Dexter's Lab. Holiday Yufine's S1 is just one bite. It has a 0.7x multiplier and has a 60 to 75% chance to burn its target one time for 2 turns. When this move is used on her turn, no other allies may dual attack, and the move's target is changed from one enemy to all enemies. Additionally, the AoE version of this attack deals neutral damage to ice element enemies. This has got a low multiplier for an AoE, but considering you can use this every turn on her turn, and it has a damaging debuff built on top of it, it adds up pretty fast, so I think it's more than fair. Her S2 is Let's Eat Together. This passive skill gives her a 50% chance to dodge attacks while she's at full health, and it reduces combat readiness debuffs from the enemies by 30 to 50% based on Molagora. Recently, this move was buffed to give her an additional 20% dodge chance regardless of how much health she has. This passive was always intended as a hard counter to Basar. Since Holiday Yufine is red, she naturally has a 50% chance to dodge anything Basar throws her way, and this passive made it 100%, which allows you to easily cleanse and undo any harm Basar would do to your team using the S3, which we'll talk about in a second. While the buffs to Holiday Yufine don't really address any of her biggest problems, they actually are a good deal better than I think most people are giving them credit. 20% dodge chance is like giving your Holiday Yufine a Moonlight Dreamblade in all scenarios. And against green units where she naturally had 50% dodge at all times, it's essentially like you're playing a Remnant Violet against them, which is really, really good. And when she's at full health, she has 70% dodge versus the entire cast, and that's definitely not nothing. Basically, anytime your opponent tries to use a debilitating S3 to try and cripple your team at the start of a fight, it's a gamble if Holiday Yufine is on your team. There is basically a 2/3 chance that she, will dodge the attack, in which case, if she's built very fast, she functions as a cleanser that doesn't really need the effect resistance compared to some of her counterparts, such as Lilius. So if you are really lucky, you can essentially, overload your Holiday Yufine with stats that aren't effect resistance and get away with it. So yeah, really, really good passive overall, and I think it will make her really annoying for quite a number of people, because having a 2/3 chance or better to dodge some of these debilitating S3s is obviously a lot better than the 50-50 chance that she had in the past. Her S3 is Yufine's special. It has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Molagora, and she gets 3 souls. It has a 1x multiplier, and it dispels 2 debuffs from all of your allies before she attacks all enemies. Unfortunately, she doesn't get the 2-turn greater attack buff from the move until after she's dealt the damage from the initial attack. Also, this move CR pushes all of your allies up by 20%. It's a pretty good S3 because this character can use it to not only CR push your team, but keep any pesky debuffs off of them. The greater attack buff also means that the character doesn't need super high attack to function really well, which goes hand in hand with the stat line that she has. It's very difficult to get the Libra Zodiac on a warrior to have crazy high attack without sacrificing something. Having a greater attack buff is a massive boon to this character, and it's awesome that her kit ends up having it. When we take a look at her soul burn, it used to give a extended buff duration to the greater attack buff on this move, which is kind of useless, honestly. It's not really super good, but the new soul burn, due to the buffs, reduces this skill's cooldown by 2 turns, which isn't amazing. However, considering that you don't get the greater attack buff before this move does any damage to begin with, having this soul burn means that you will be able to actually cycle around before the greater attack buff wears off, which means as long as you have souls, you can get a juiced up version of this move. And it has pretty good damage for an AoE. 1x is, fairly respectable damage, and I suspect that, spamming this move with the soul burn is great against a lot of squishy comps and is a great answer to a lot of pesky stealth heroes such as Spectre Tenebria. When it comes to Molagora priorities, you want to use some Molagoras to get the reduced cooldown on her S3 first. After that, I would probably prioritize the damage on S1 since you will be using this for most of the fight. After that, consider finishing off the S3 to max out the damage, and then finally you can max S2. This is optional if you're only trying to play Holiday Yufine as a damage dealer or use her for PvE content. This is not necessary. Eventually, I feel like if you really want to maximize the anti-Basar matchup, you will want to max this skill, but it is not entirely necessary for most players. I think for a lot of you, you can get away with just playing this character at plus 10. So for once, there is a damage dealer that I'm recommending that you play at only plus 10 as opposed to plus 15. So the first build we're going to talk about is a sustained DPS build. We are trying to leverage the newest buffs this character has gotten. That means we are trying to maintain full health whenever possible to keep up the 70% dodge chance, and in a long battle, the change to the soul burn will make sure that she does a little bit more damage than she did in the past. Now, you might be thinking in order to stay at high health, we probably want to be playing this character on lifesteal, which the logic is sound, but the math doesn't really check out. Lifesteal only gives you 20% of the damage dealt back as health, which, for most players, that's going to be about 3,000 to 4,000 health. Now, that's not nothing, but at the highest levels of PvP, that's not going to keep you topped off. Because Holiday Yufine is fortunate enough to be a warrior, we can use Sigurd's Scythe, though, and just choose a set of equipment that will just give us bonus stats and completely bypass the need to play a lifesteal set. Sigurd's Scythe at plus 15 gives 37.5% lifesteal when you're low on health, and obviously it goes up higher the more copies you have fused into it. So really, really powerful when you think about it. 37.5% is almost double what the lifesteal set gives you. So now instead of getting 3,000 to 4,000, you're looking at something at maybe 8,000. And if you have a bunch of extra copies, you might be even looking at something like 10,000. That's enough to almost top off your Holiday Yufine with just a single S1, and that is what makes it so powerful. So we're definitely going to be on a speed immunity set with a Sigurd's Scythe. You can see in the offsets here, I say lifesteal, even though I just gave you a whole spiel about how it's not good. That is great for the Secretary Vera Dagger Sakar quest. So if you want to try to clear that quest where you need 4 warriors, you can play lifesteal, you don't need Sigurd's Scythe, and you can just use these stats minus the actual speed. Looking at the numbers, we want 3,300 attack, 1,200 defense so that she has some decent bulk, 13k HP or better, again for decent bulk, 230 speed or better. This is the lowest I'd probably go. We need this character to kind of cycle turns quickly, and when we talk about the other builds, she'll need to be even faster than this to be really effective. 85% crit chance. This is just so that we can do some good damage, and when we actually land a critical hit, we want 250 critical hit damage so that it actually does hurt. Looking at the right side, we are on a crit damage necklace, attack percentage ring, speed boots, and the artifact is definitely Sigurd's Scythe. I have Snow Crystal and Champion's Trophy also written here, and we'll talk about those in a second. You can play these exact statistics with Snow Crystal for the reasons we'll describe in the next section. Champion's Trophy is a viable choice on this character, but I probably would not use this stat line for it. Looking at the average piece, we need 15% attack, 10 speed, 12% crit chance, and some amount of either crit damage or bulk stats in the last slot. Last summer when Holiday Yufine first came out, there were 2 other popular builds, which I will include here. I don't know if they're viable anymore at the highest level of World Arena, but again, for completeness sake, we are going to include them here. Holiday Yufine is one of those characters who can have a completely different playstyle based on the artifact that she's wearing. We already talked about the sustained damage build with the Sigurd Scythe, and now we're going to talk about two other ones using the artifacts Champions Trophy and Snow Crystal. So the first one to talk about is the one on your screen, Champions Trophy, and it just so happens to be the artifact that is rated up on Holiday Yufine's banner. So what this move does, or I should say this artifact does, is it changes any basic skill into a potential stun. And because Holiday Yufine's basic skill is AoE, this can be a team-wide stun against the enemy, which is really powerful and reminiscent of characters such as Dizzy or a Silverblade Araminta holding an Abyssal Crown. That is really powerful. In fact, this was the original build that I used to have for Holiday Yufine back in the day. To accomplish it, you're basically going to take the first build, drop all the crit chance and crit damage out of it, pump up the speed, pump up the effectiveness, and pump up the health, obviously. The biggest issue that I had with this build and why I no longer play it is you simply just don't do enough damage to close out games, and there's a heavy RNG component to it. If you try and play a control team, she might end up waking people up because she's AoE, but on top of that, if you just don't proc the stuns, you just don't get wins with the character. And if you're not playing her in a dedicated control team and they pick off your other damage dealer, you might have trouble closing out games, again, if RNG is not on your side. So take note of that and keep that in mind when you decide to go for that build. The second artifact that we're going to talk about is Snow Crystal. It synergizes incredibly well with Holiday Yufine's S2 passive. If you don't know what it does, it gives you some effect resistance to Holiday Yufine for wearing it, and whenever she suffers a non-critical hit, it will increase her combat readiness between 8 and 16% depending on the level of the artifact. Because the character has an innate 70% dodge chance at full health, there's a 70% chance that they don't land a critical hit, because you cannot land a critical hit if you miss, which means that this character can push up ahead of the rest of the enemies, use her S3 to cleanse any potential debuffs that hit the rest of your team, and bring them along for the ride, so you can essentially leapfrog over your opponent and take the second, third, and fourth turn, and so on and so forth. This is a very good artifact, and if you don't have Sigurd Scythe, you can absolutely play this on the very first build that we talked about. You won't be as good at sustaining, but you can kind of multitask and be not only a good AoE red damage dealer, but still a cleanser. And if you really want to lean into that cleansing role, just like how we dropped a bunch of stats to get more health, speed, and effectiveness for Champions Trophy, you can do the same and drop the crit chance and crit damage and go for higher health, higher speed, and of course higher effect resistance. So let's take a quick look at the actual builds. So we're going to be on speed immunity still, and taking a look at the numbers, we have 3,000 attack, 1,200 defense, 15.5k health, 250 speed or better. I feel like if you are going to be on either of these builds, you definitely want to be really fast. The reason you want to be fast for the Champions Trophy build is the faster you go, the more chances you have to land AoEs, which means more stuns. And then obviously most of the debilitating debuffs in the game are usually dished out by characters who are blazingly fast, so you need to be somewhere close to their speed so that way you can cut in front of them with Snow Crystal. So yeah, really important that the character is fast. That is the most important thing. No crit chance, no crit damage. I have 100% effectiveness and 100% effect resistance here. Depending on which one you're trying to go for, Champions Trophy or Snow Crystal, pick one or the other. If you're going for Champions Trophy, 100 is the lowest I would go, because you want to be able to have some chance to be able to stun those Soul Weavers and those Knights potentially. You probably won't have a great rate against them anyway, but at least try to go for 100. The effect resistance, 100 is probably the lowest I would go if you are just really trying to make this character a dedicated cleanser. I really would caution you to go for the hybrid build that we talked about already on the first build with Snow Crystal, but if you really only care about this character being a dedicated cleanser, then by all means pump up the effect resistance. Taking a look at the right side, we're on HP percentage or attack percentage neck, depending on what kind of substats you have on it. And then for the ring, you can go HP percentage and attack percentage, or also defense percentage. When I first built the character, I was actually on attack percentage neck and defense percentage ring with a ton of health percentage substats spread throughout. Boots are going to be speed, and then the artifact obviously is going to either be Champions Trophy or Snow Crystal, depending on which build you decided to go for. Looking at the per piece average, you're going to need 14 speed or better on a piece, 17% of your choice of either effectiveness or effect resistance, 8% attack, and then some amount of bulk stats in the last slot. When it comes to teammates for Holiday Yufine, you want to double up on the things that already make her a solid pick in the first place. So for our protection, I'm going to recommend a tank like Fallen Cecilia. Yes, I know, ML 5-star, but you guys have to understand the character is played heavily for a reason. Those barriers can keep your health high and full for a long time, which means more dodge chances, which is more chances for her to be annoying, land burns, and, save her team with her cleanse. Lilius is a great way to double up on the cleanse situation. They're both red cleansers, which will basically lock Basar out. If you draft both Lilius and Holiday Yufine, Basar is basically a non-issue, so that's great. And Lilius also can double up on the protection by holding things like Aureus or Adamant Shield as her artifact. Researcher Carrot allows you to double up on heavy burns and AoEs, which is a nightmare for stealth heroes. So if you are struggling with stealth heroes and they haven't really drafted a blue unit and you've already drafted the Researcher Carrot, you can basically last pick the Holiday Yufine and feel pretty content about your draft. And then the last one is largely a gimmick, but Assassin Kartua actually works pretty well with your Holiday Yufine. Now that she has innate dodge chance and the 50% while being at full health, I believe the Assassin Kartua gives you something like 90% dodge chance while you're at full health, which is ludicrous. That can allow you to steal games from control players and cleave players because your fast Holiday Yufine might be able to cut in front of them, and there's not really a way they can, stun it or lock it down. They just have to kind of kill it, and if you dodge it, there's a very high chance she's still living. Looking at Holiday Yufine's good matchup, she is great against debuff heroes, especially Basar. She was designed as a hard counter to Basar, so that is definitely one that you can check off the list as a great matchup. But if you have some luck, you can also pick her into things like Fairy Tale Tenebria and possibly get away with it. I'm not going to say it is always a good matchup, but because of the increased dodge chance at full health, you have a chance of potentially dodging and getting, away with it. I know that not everyone has a really powerful cleanser. You might not have something like Designer Lilibet, so you can use Holiday Yufine as a hard counter to Fairy Tale Tenebria if luck is on your side. Not the greatest matchup, but does work. She's also really good against green DPS. Think of things like Landy. You have a native 70% chance to dodge against all green DPS, so excellent pick there in a lot of situations, especially against Landy because most people have her on Guiding Light and she's in stealth. And speaking of stealth, excellent against Tempest Cern as well as Spectre Tenebria. They cannot hide from you. Even if they go into stealth, you can basically hit them out of stealth with any of your AoE attacks. And if they throw any debuffs on your team, you can just cleanse them with the S3. For bad matchups, there's only really a couple that Holiday Yufine has. The problem is that they are incredibly punishing and almost everyone has them geared. They are characters that punish AoE attacks really hard. Things like Last Rider Crow, General Purgus, and Seaside Bellona. All of these characters give a ton of utility to their team for spamming any AoEs against them, and they dish out a ton of damage in return for AoEing the team. And since that's all Holiday Yufine can do is AoE, your team is going to die very quickly if you play her into these characters. The final character to talk about is Elena. If you guys are not aware of how good Elena is going to be into the upcoming meta, allow me to explain. With the buff to Elena's S2, she no longer needs to hold Magaraha's Tome, which allows for more flexibility in her builds. When you couple this with the insane buff that they gave to Doctor's Bag, Elena is an absolute nightmare for any debuff characters or high frequency AoE heroes. She hard counters characters such as Cerise, Researcher Carrot, and a slew of other high pick heroes that are in the current meta. If Holiday Yufine doesn't make an impact yet again this year, I feel it's going to be almost entirely due to how good I think Elena will be in the upcoming season. And that's going to do it for the Holiday Yufine guide. As I've said throughout the video, I do think the character is mostly improved, significantly better than she used to be. I just don't know if she'll be top tier at the highest levels of play simply because of the bad matchups that she has. They are very commonly played, and Elena is seeming to be a very common pick in the preseason, so I expect her to be fairly common as the season goes on and progresses. So if you're on the fence, I still highly recommend rolling for the character simply because it is limited. you should always try to aim to pick up every single limited hero. Speaking of limited heroes, the collab was announced yesterday for Epic 7. It is with ReZero. If you are not familiar with ReZero, it was an anime that came out in 2016 and was, in my opinion, a pretty good one. So if you're a fan of time traveling stories and, you know, cute waifus, I highly recommend checking it out, at least for no other reason than to familiarize yourself with the world and the characters for when the inevitable collab does drop here in Epic 7. If you've already seen ReZero, by the way, I highly recommend checking out the anime Vivi Fluorite Eyes song, which came out earlier this year and is by the same exact author as ReZero. So if you're a fan of ReZero and you are a fan of, you know, futuristic cyborgs trying to prevent Armageddon, I highly recommend checking that out. As always, enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Later, guys.